Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Brew Bar.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Joining me, as always, your friend and mine, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
I got a full-on robot chubby.
A perfect example of the lowbrow comedy that exists simultaneously with the highbrow comedy in this movie.
But it is also, I would argue, low and highbrow comedy.
Yeah,
Because
right.
there's a lot of metaphysical discussion in this movie.
Plenty.
And I'm gonna say, do robots get boners? Is a perfect example of that.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But I mean, even on the level of genre, the fact that the movie is able to have fun at the expense of its own clunky science fiction trappings,
Right.
tells me everything I need to know about how confidently
actually
it attacks
right.
the genre it's in.
Well, because I'm blanking on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the original director. But the original director didn't want to come back specifically for that reason. He always felt like Bill and Ted was a parody of sort of an amalgam of different sci-fi movies, and that this would end up being a parody of a parody.
Right. Well, he's not wrong.
But
he's not wrong, but he's entirely missed the point. I mean...
Exactly, yeah.
This is the same but more so. It's like... Yeah. I think, but they play those references intelligently, comedically, and what more could you ask for?
Well, based on our ranking episode, we know I'm an unabashed fan.
So am I.
I think you are just as big.
I have a couple of nitpicks with this movie, and that is it. And they're not big deals. And they're not really the fault of this movie. Yeah. They're the fault of 1991.
All right. Well, we'll get to it. So we are, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, talking about Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, a 1991 film directed by Peter Hewitt. Peter Hewitt. Tom and Huck. Thunderpants. Do you know that movie?
We have actually talked about Thunderpants on this podcast.
I had an inkling that Thunderpants might have been. You brought up Thunderpants for some episode, didn't you?
When we did the Harry Potter series,
Harry Potter.
I vaguely remembered that Ron Weasley was in. We were talking Thunderpants. We were comparing everyone's.
Because I hadn't heard of it at the time.
We were comparing.
And now I'm asking you if you've heard of it, and you're the one that told me. Great.
We were comparing the different post Harry Potter career trajectories of the leads,
right?
And and I made the point that for a while Ron Weasley had to sort of settle for movies about a
farting child,
a fart powered rocket.
fart powered, yeah. Well, he also did some definite "How Dare You" nominees, Zoom and Garfield. And then he's done another sequel, Home Alone: The Holiday Heist, which I'm sure is one of those
He's
direct-to-videos.
a little bit like that Video Hitchcock guy. Was it Don Michael Paul?
Oh, yeah, I don't.
Who did a couple of the Tremor sequels, and his resume is sort of pretty much entirely video.
But I
sequels.
find this fascinating that this guy, the guy Peter Hewitt that gave us Garfield and Zoom, gave us such an interesting, intelligent, philosophical movie.
Right. And a lot of that's there in the screenplay, but
yeah,
he does have to occasionally has to bring that out artistically and dramatically, and I think he does a great job at that.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean,
this movie also only has 56% on Rotten Tomatoes.
see, this
That's criminal. That really makes me sad. I don't think people got it.
I don't think people got it. I think it's misremembered as a misfire.
Oh,
I think Face the Music is part of that problem. I think because it's almost situating itself as a direct sequel to Excellent Adventure. We talked about this on the previous episode.
Yeah.
And I think because there is this slight embarrassment about Bogus Journey, which is
absurd.
Which is absurd. And, you get this with any movie that takes a certain formula known for its lightness into darker territory. It's almost automatically seen as a bad move, which is absolutely ludicrous, and especially in this.
It's ludicrous for one, and also in this particular example, I mean, there's darkness in the movie, but it's not a lot. Even the fact that you're dealing with the Grim Reaper because you have
I don't know.
this
it gets
amazingly
pretty heavy,
talented actor.
This movie gets pretty
What's
heavy.
That? I mean,
they die 20 minutes into the movie.
They die and they go to hell.
Right, but you don't know when you're watching that they're not dead forever. And that really struck me in this viewing.
So, but even that, like the only part that really truly feels dark is after Lucifer or Beelzebub himself sends him sort of into that world of Twilight Zone and German expressionism.
Fucking horrible.
Of child sadness. But that's dark.
You look at you go online, you see like what are the top Google images for this movie. It's that horrific stuff. It's Alex Winter dressed up as his own evil grandma.
Yeah.
The fucking Easter Bunny. By
the way, I have a note
Pan's Labyrinth Hell Maze.
Yeah. Right. But I do have a note here that one of the IMDb notes was, this is the only movie in the history of cinema to feature both the Grim Reaper and the Easter Bunny. Which I think says it all.
It does, yeah.
Well, this movie had a budget. Also, this kind of makes me sad and mad. Budget of $20 million, an opening weekend of 10.2, but in the USA and the world, only $38 million. I think you're right when you're saying that people thought of this movie as a misfire. And that really is astonishing to me.
It is. It's...
Because if you're a lover of film,
right,
how could you not like this movie?
I do
with
think
everything it's drawing on and referencing.
I think it's so self-conscious about kind of flipping the script. I wonder whether...
You think the movie's self-conscious about it?
Yeah, when you kill your characters 20 minutes into the movie and have an extended sequence in hell, I think you're going into darker territory than, say, Beethoven playing an electric guitar or whatever happens in, I haven't seen it in years. Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, but I don't think they're self-conscious about it.
What
I think they're making a bold choice.
This is meant to be darker material than the original.
Yeah.
You don't think it's self-conscious. You think it's an accident.
No, I think it's purposeful.
I do too. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I thought you meant self-conscious in
No, I meant self-conscious.
They don't feel good about it.
Terms. No, I don't think it's insecure about it at all.
Yeah, like Insecure. Yeah.
The movie's called Bogus Journey. And as I understand in the Bill and Ted lexicon, bogus is the opposite of excellent.
Right.
No, I think they're going for that full throttle. And I think...
Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page.
I just think...
Thank you.
I think, I think audiences and critics, it sounds like, think that that's automatically a mistake. That it's not...
Right.
Right, that it was accidental, that it it was not being able
Oh, I
to
thought you
handle
meant
the
a mistake
material.
as in just the wrong way to go.
The wrong way to go, but also that they'd somehow fluffed the material. When in fact, when you watch this movie,
That's absurd.
that is
though.
absurd.
Like that's
because when you watch, but
that's-
when you watch the movie, it's very, very clear that this is the direction they wanted to go in.
Mhm.
And they did everything to make that a case. It's also, you know, just from a purely sort of, just in terms of originality, you know, the screenwriters are asking the question, okay, we've done time travel, what's next?
Mhm.
Let's go to the afterlife.
Right.
We've got a dichotomy there. We've got heaven and hell. That can be our past and our present this time. Let's do it.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
But they're drawing on so much more too, because they're drawing on the idea of people that are subject to free will, meaning that they they have to find themselves in their purpose in life.
Yeah.
And the only way these two characters can find their way back to the purpose that they know they're supposed to get to this concert.
Right.
And they have to go through death to do that.
Yeah.
But they're the two perfect vessels to go through death because nobody's ever beaten death.
Right.
I mean, we're not really there yet, but anyway, it's just working on, it's drawing from such deep wells
Yeah.
that make me admire this movie so much.
There's a psychological depth, and there's a cineliterate depth here that makes all the difference for me. But yeah, maybe 2 or 3 years later, everyone's creaming over Pulp Fiction. Maybe it was just 2-3 years too early.
Too early, maybe.
And they didn't see it coming in a Bill and Ted sequel.
Oh man, I mean, I watched this movie and I sort of lamented that it's not up. It's not up there in the upper echelon and stratosphere of what people think about for sequels. Because it's that good to me.
Yeah, and I always held it in really high
on its
regard.
own and as a sequel.
Say again.
On its own and as a sequel, because like you said,
Stands alone.
we already went to the past and we brought back some of history's most famous and important people. What do we do now? Well, let's kill them.
Yeah.
But like, not just kill them. Let's have them go through an existential
and let's meet
crisis
their evil doppelgangers as well. That's like one of the first things that happens in the movie. By the way, this series as a whole, I have never known a film series that is more concerned with creating alternate versions of their leading characters than this series.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, it's a fetish.
It goes
full-on
really
fetish.
bananas. It goes bananas in the next film.
It goes bananas in the next film, but in this film we get...
And I'm not talking like just a bunch of bananas or like a tree of bananas. I'm talking a plantation of bananas.
Right.
That you couldn't see from
a banana-rama,
with a
if you will.
Yeah.
But even here we have Ghost Bill and Ted, Evil Bill and Ted,
right?
Two kinds of robot Bill and Ted.
I forgot that there was a second group of robots.
I mean, it's duality gone wild.
Yeah.
Even like one of the supporting characters in the movie is two people that turn into one.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which, by the way, is never explained, and I love that.
And I love it.
That's another reason where the screenwriting is on point. Do not explain something that is just brilliant and it's just in there because we want to see it. You do not have to do that.
I also read a note that station was station because of a typo in the script, and they just kept it, which is like amazing.
It is. It's phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal.
Well, did you have any notes, by the way, on the title card? Because I when the Bogus kind of balloon. I was like, they're even doing a joke with the title of the film.
Oh, not a second of this movie is wasted.
Like, exactly.
From second one to the end of the final credits. Not 1 second of this movie is wasted. Well, my first notes are even before the unsurprisingly before the movie begins with the Orion.
Were you happy
logo.
to see the Orion logo?
It just makes me so happy.
It
so
does. It
many
makes me
movies
happy
of my
too.
youth
That's my first note.
that I hold dear begin in this fashion.
On my paper, it says Orion logo / Bogus Journey title.
Well, yeah, because exactly. This was a double hit of nostalgia for me because you also get that early '90s stretch lettering in the titles, which I associate with again all-time great movies like Speed and The Fugitive, and it made me wonder, where did this go? This is such a lovely aesthetic. Why would you go move away from that?
I also remember anytime I saw the Orion logo, I always felt safe in the sense of I was going to see a good movie.
Oh, I thought you meant like, as in like, I didn't even think you meant in movie terms. I felt like,
no,
like your parents, instead of giving you a babysitter, would just put on,
right,
an Orion movie. And so when you saw that logo, you knew, I'm not in the house alone. I have a babysitter. It's Peter Weller, but I have a babysitter. That's wonderful.
I just.
But yeah, absolutely.
My parents dropped me off at one of those piece of shit, 20th century movies. No, whenever I saw the Orion logo as a kid, I remember thinking I'm going to see a good movie.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's.
And I was so happy to see it.
I wasn't.
For Face the Music, too.
I knew it was a cheat.
I was shocked.
I knew it was lying to us. But we'll get to that. Yeah,
because it didn't come through for me on that one.
And the actual title, I have it here as a Saved by the Bell style graphic.
Yeah, totally.
But it's really interesting because
and we're doing a lot of stuff with that. When you see when we go into the future, and people are walking around and they've got their ultra huge boots on, but it all smacks vaguely of Super Mario Brothers, doesn't it? Which was super popular at the time.
Well, it's just like,
I think they're drawing on stuff like that.
But there's these really interesting contrasts and counterpoints, which is where the artistry of it is, because you have this, like, when we arrive in the future, the set design of this future is kind of cubist, I would say.
Yeah.
It has a kind of Picasso-like edge to it. But then you've got the kind of comic book style of the titles. And again, so you have that juxtaposition of high and low, which is all working together. And then in terms of costuming, it's like a full-on kids cartoon. It's like something I'd show to my kid on Nickelodeon. But the set design is austere, like hard sci-fi. So you have this immediately. You have this mix of goofy and grounded. That's just, it speaks to the richness of the whole movie. And then Joss Ackland turns up, and you're like, "Fucking hell!" We're like, we're setting a high bar here, right? It's sort of like, because you expect what? You expect George Carlin to return, obviously. Well, it's like,
sure.
Oh yeah, let's just throw in one of the greatest character actors of the age.
Well, and I have something to say about Joss Ackland too, because you're right, one of the greatest character actors we ever had. But he also, from what I've read, only did the movie because family members kind of wanted him to, and he wasn't super happy. Like, he didn't get it, and he didn't think it was very good. Right. And he always even kind of regretted doing the movie.
There you go. There's another reason why people there's another publicity reason
might think less of it. But it reminds me of our chat for Mannequin when we're talking about G.W. Bailey, who said, we really thought we were making a movie that nobody would see and blah, blah, blah. But you never see it in the performance.
No. Well, that's professionalism, isn't it? It's just...
And Joss Ackland brings exactly what you want Joss Ackland to bring. whenever you see him on screen.
And this is not specific to maybe this movie, but just Excellent Adventure as a franchise. But it struck me that you have George Carlin and you have the phone booth.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a reference to sort of one of the great. I mean, comedian is reductive. One of the great spoken word artists of the last 30 years.
Oh, are you kidding me? The stratophonic oxygenatic amplifier graphophonadella verberator?
Yeah.
Because he wrote that himself.
You've got to think. Oh well, at least he has the dexterity and the dexterous tongue to make it work. Or it's like it's one of the same. Or it's written for him and he nailed it. Whichever way it came out. But the phone booth is.
But he delivers it in just the in the exact tone that you expect from George Carlin.
Right.
And it warms your heart.
It does. But you have
and it actually ends up lasting for the whole movie, because another thing I forgot was how little he is in the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you have the phone booth, which is straight out of Doctor Who. It's one of those, probably one of the parody elements that the director of Excellent Adventure was talking about, because that's a straight rip from time traveling. Phone box is the essence of Doctor Who. Interestingly, Doctor Who cancelled the first iteration of Doctor Who cancelled in 1989, the same year that Excellent Adventure came out, which I find fascinating.
Right.
But overall, it just reminded me that it's not just Mike Myers who's thinking of these transatlantic 1960s pop culture references.
Mm-hmm.
Like, clearly, this is going on in the zeitgeist more than just Mike Myers. Like, other people are making these kinds of references.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say if it's literally in the zeitgeist or if there's just a few people who like the same things. You know?
And so I mean, this scene is fantastic for so many reasons.
You're talking about with Carlin and Eklund?
the whole scene. We do something that a lot of sequels do, where they're trying to find an interesting way to do to recap the previous movie.
Yeah. I have the same note.
With the historical figures coming out of the phone booth, and they're sort of like they've given you the first movie in a microcosm there.
In under 20 seconds, they've given you the first movie.
Which is more interesting than simply doing a recap montage or just saying it in dialogue.
Right. Is this the first time we're seeing that, sort of in this form? The recap in this way?
I can't think of any other. It's basically just an allusion to what we're, and the phone booth itself, of course, the return of the phone booth, the return of Rufus. It's just,
but it's like how
it's front loading with the movie with what we're familiar with and catching us up, but in a way that doesn't feel leaden or artificial to the story to a new story that we're starting to tell.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of the kind of the having Rufus have a nemesis in Denomalos. Immediately went
his
to
gym teacher.
Turns out to be his gym teacher.
I mean, come on.
I mean, this comic book or fantasy movie stuff. Like, I thought of the X-Men, Magneto and Dr. Xavier,
Professor
of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's the same dynamic.
Yeah.
Kind of played out. And you get the cyberpunk.
Well, and you get some wordplay jokes too when he says time will tell. He says time has told.
There's so much wordplay. I mean, in this first sequence, the terrorists are these kind of cyberpunk Dayglow looking people.
Reminds you a little of Batman Forever.
It does. And it's like the most, and so like the set design is the most timeless looking science fiction married to the most dated looking costume design, which I think is beautiful because it works on two levels. It's a movie that's clearly part of the early 90s, but it's also part of a more of a more sort of universal idea of what science fiction is, and that's all going on at once. I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day, you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beers. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, gushing over Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. We're talking about this front half, or the, kind of first scene in the movie, Tom, and it occurred to me, too, that, you have this simplified, easy way to sort of catch the audience up with everything from the first movie. But then they also take just a couple minutes via the evil robots to explain the narrative of this movie. Yeah. Minus the going to hell.
Right, and even even more than that, I'd say that this is a classic impasse.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first Bill and Ted we see are evil robot Bill and Ted.
Right.
So immediately there's a sequel inversion of character type.
You got yourself an inversion, right?
Yeah. And I have the same thing here about we're resetting the expectations for the tone of this sequel, because here you have Bill and Ted doing Bill and Ted shtick, but in a darker and more dystopian context. Yeah. So already something's feeling off in a good way, in a very good way.
And also remarkable work with the bots themselves and the skin.
Excellent latex and animatronics.
It looks
in so many ways, this movie feels like the last hurrah of practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're gonna push the envelope because.
Well, I also find it interesting. Yeah, I find it interesting that this movie comes out the same year as Terminator 2.
I made that comparison as well, again that almost, that almost intangible combo of practical and video effects.
Mm-hmm.
And it melds just as well here in a low key way, but it's the same kind. It's working off the interaction. That's where you get good effects from. And there was I think we realize that now. But there's a good the 30 years in between.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
We were just heading in one direction, and now, special effects artists are coming out and saying, the best kind of effect is if you don't know if it's practical or digital.
Right.
But as we saw with this in Terminator 2, we knew this in 1991. We just forgot it.
Right.
We absolutely knew. We just made both elements as good as they could be.
Well, and I remember saying the same thing to Lady Chu for the How Dare You podcast. We were doing Nightmare on Elm Street, and there's that moment where Freddy's kind of coming out of the wall or the ceiling, or, it's kind of a slanted. But, that's a practical effect. They literally just put a sheet over a hole in the wall, and the person went through it. But it looks digital almost.
Yeah.
And
right. Because you're not supposed to know, because that's the point of an effect.
Because that's the point, exactly. And even the moments where you're seeing the effect as an effect in this movie, it's for a desired effect from the filmmakers,
Exactly. Yeah. They're hiding behind the kitschiness of it.
Yeah.
But you can absolutely tell when they're going for that and when they're just trying to give you a realistic looking effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's
And it
very
gives you. I mean, we're not there narratively in the story yet, so maybe I'll wait. But yeah, I'll save it.
Okay.
At any rate,
Pam Grier.
my next. Yeah, that's where I was going next. Pam
Okay.
Grier.
But by the way, I gotta say, as with the historical figures in the phone coming out of the phone booth, there is no better way to reintroduce the major legacy characters than through a band intro.
Yeah, exactly.
You've woven it into the story there.
Yeah.
Smart screenwriting, and throughout this movie, but especially there. And at this point, I'm starting to realize, okay, so literally every supporting character in this franchise is played by the most established and best in their field.
Yeah, right.
Pam Grier, George Carlin, Joss Ackland. Later on, we're going to have Taj Mahal as the voice of God. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And William Sadler doesn't have the fame behind him, but still, there is no better character. There is no better character actor.
But if you talk to a movie lover and you mention William Sadler, like the people who know, you know.
But perhaps not at this point. But it's definitely. I mean, it's the same level of quality.
Mm-hmm.
But these people are recognized, recognized as the best in their field going into this movie. That's what strikes me, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a nice Star Wars wipe here as well. The end of the scene. And I was trying to think, is this the late 80s or is it a homage to Star Wars? It's probably both, because it's that interesting a movie that it's probably both.
And that's the thing, is that, I mean, you said it earlier. What you said was there's not a single second of this movie is wasted.
No.
And it just lends to my next thought, which is, I mean, everything is so purposeful in this movie. Every choice made, both in the writing and the directing.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, like, how this guy...
What's wrong
Garfield
with the
Zoom?
world? Yeah. Do you remember if the military recruiter that we see is from the original movie, or is he a brand new character? Because I have a bad record of this.
I've watched the original. I watched it maybe a year ago, but I want to say a new character. I don't remember.
I think he is.
Chelsea Ross being in the first one, but I could be wrong.
But he feels borderline in that it feels like we've seen this guy before. But I actually think we haven't, and I think the reason he feel like we've seen him before is because he feels completely organic to what we know about Bill and Ted, to the Gen X paranoia about having another Vietnam and having to be drafted,
and having to go, to be drafted.
And we have another self-aware sequel inversion here, which is like, an imbas, but it's called out for what it is, where Missy swaps dads.
Yes, I know.
I mean, way to keep it on point in terms of characterization.
Yeah.
It's just excellent.
And I love that they keep that in the next film too.
Yeah, kind of.
It doesn't work as well.
No.
But
I don't know if I should save this for the next movie, but I have an analogy as to what the next movie is in relation to this one. Well, I'll keep it.
Keep it.
It's a good one. I don't want to blow it now, because we're being, want to stay positive.
Right. Because it's funny too, because we mentioned Pam Grier and
peak hotness, by the way. Peak hotness, Pam Grier, I think.
Oh man. But it also...
I don't want to ogle her too much, because that apparently is the job of the movie to do that. But
but it also struck me that, it's 1991, so we're 6 years away from Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
And, she doesn't have a lot to do in the film.
No.
So it's one of those things where, you love that she's in it.
Yeah.
Like, I love having her, but it also feels like a waste of her talent.
I wouldn't say. Oh, I think
I'm-
she's actually. I think she's well used actually overall, but it takes the whole movie for you to realize how important she is in the movie.
Right, yeah.
And I see why they cast someone
But the other thing is,
of her star in it.
Yeah.
Like I get that totally. Because
And
of how it plays out.
her gravitas kind of lends to the bit at the end.
Yes. Agreed.
So that works.
And then something I remember from my very first viewing of this is we see Bill and Ted watching a rerun of Star Trek.
Yeah, so
With William Shatner clambering over Vasquez rocks.
is it the Gorn Rock episode? Or what's it called?
Yeah, well, this exposed the limits of my nerddom. Well, this I have the same. I have that exact.
But
note
I do love that they have that episode on a television that they're watching, and then it's we're gonna be that's where they're gonna be thrown off a cliff.
Yeah, and it works on two levels because we all
Yeah.
know that that's Vasquez Rocks, which
Yeah.
would be accessible to Bill and Ted geographically.
Mhm.
So you're both reenacting Star Trek, but you're also making reference to where the actual geographical location where it was filmed at the same time. Which again is that brilliant postmodernism that this movie encapsulates. But I also thought that like Star Trek's are really good at this point, sort of like it's Gen X-y enough not to seem like pure nerddom.
Yeah, right.
It's like, and the same thing happened in Wayne's World 2 with Bob Odenkirk and Robert Smigel. It's like, we're not those nerds.
Yeah.
We're nerdy, but we're
Right.
not those nerds. And I felt exactly the same thing here. It's like, we watch reruns of Star Trek late at night because we're Gen X.
Yeah.
But we're not, we're not nerds. We're not full-on nerds. We don't know the name of the episode. We know it's the one where he climbs up Vasquez Rocks. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then here's probably the first, like, in this scene where evil robot Bill and Ted and regular Bill and Ted meet.
Mm-hmm.
The built-in awareness of repeating yourself in sequel form, because he says Ted, Bill says Ted, it's us again.
Yeah, right.
Which is a phenomenal line.
It's a fantastic line.
Because you're aware that you're doing the same thing again, but the dramatic irony is it's not the same.
Well, and I
But
also
the characters don't know that it's not just
Yeah.
them from the future. So it's brilliant premise.
But I also like this moment where Ted takes Bill aside and goes, "Dude, I don't know, but I don't really trust them."
Yeah.
And they have to make that decision as well, And of course, his instinct was right, but because they've been through everything that they went through in the last movie,
Yeah.
I just really appreciated the time they took to
Yeah.
the characters realize something was off, and then they talk themselves out of it,
That's it.
That's great.
And the next thing I have is that they die, which talk about big swings.
Yeah.
There's no bigger. Killing off
Right.
your titular characters. I mean, Psycho is not called Marion Crane.
Right, yeah.
You kill them off. And
This is like Bruce Willis getting off the plane and then getting hit by a car in Die Hard.
right. It's so you're like, this is a lot darker than you're expecting, but you've been expecting it because of the way the movie's set up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's not a failure, and maybe.
But this
critics
is
and
also when
audiences
we
are
start
struggling
drawing
with
from
that.
the well, and we're going to get into Ingmar Bergman, and we're going to get into the Seventh Seal, and just seeing,
Yeah,
just
that's a high art reference.
yeah, seeing William Sadler off in the distance, and then right behind them, and I really love the ghost dead Bill and Ted themselves.
Oh, that
too.
bleached out color palette is a really
It's a great
really
effect.
interesting choice.
Yeah,
Because it's it's playing. Obviously, you have the art movie tone with the Seventh Seal references, but you've also become a horror movie,
right.
and stylistically,
But to
we
your
lean
point
into
earlier, yeah, and to your point earlier, you still don't need any of that knowledge to be enjoying what you're seeing.
No.
Which is great.
But that's why it's that sort of oscillation between high and low, which is so fantastic. It's not just that here's Death from the Seventh Seal looking exactly as he does in that movie, but there's an underwear crotch gag button on the scene.
And, so there, exactly. And I mean, we won't find this out till later, but the nature of Death himself, as played by William Sadler, is an astonishing bit of comedy as it's written, as it's directed, as it's performed. Like everything coming together in a perfect way. Yeah.
And it's everything takes a very sinister turn here. I'm still feel chilled from the image of Ghost Bill and Ted watching their doppelgangers try and rape their girlfriends.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
But I think that, there's stuff in here which I think minimizes rape culture, and that's not good, and I blame that on 1991, not this movie.
Yeah.
But this moment,
but I also juxtapose that with
it's part of the horror, it's part of the terror.
Yeah.
Like it's built into the terror
because they can't do anything about it.
Yes, that's
and they haven't made the choice yet to confront death.
Right. We get some kind of cutting edge visual effects here as well. I mean, it's not as showy or involved as Terminator 2, but it's just as good. Walking through the ghosts looks fantastic.
So that was one of the ones where I thought some people might think that looks janky, but to them I say, even if you thought that, matches the tone of the movie.
Right.
I mean, one, I think you're wrong, but
it looks
two,
good.
Yeah, I think it looks good, but two, for those that think it looks like a lesser effect because it was, 30 years ago,
yeah,
it still matches the tone of the movie, so it still works.
And it works. It's Hal Landon Jr.'s performance that makes it work for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's like he's. The graphic might be basic. I don't know if it was in 91. I don't think it was at all. Might seem that way to us now. But the performance of Hal Landon Jr.
Hal Landon Jr., it's one of my notes. It's
its own special effect, right?
Oh, it's so good.
This movie is nothing without the strength of its cast.
Yeah.
And then I love... See, this is what's interesting. Like, Bill and Ted in the... And I made the Beavis and Butthead comparison in the last episode. And I think that's a very apt comparison. Because that is a social satire. And so is Bill and Ted.
Mm-hmm.
It's about...
It's the opposite. It's the opposite of what you imagine teenagers to be, because the philosophy of Bill and Ted is be excellent to each other.
Right.
So they're you're talking about that, them having to be confronted with the evil robots raping the women that they love, but I always juxtapose that against like how sweet and kind-hearted the two characters are.
I mean,
I think I'd forgotten that about these movies, about what charming, good people they are.
Yeah.
And that goes a long ways. And I think it also cuts through the darkness. And I think it's intentional. That's why you can have all the dark shit, because you have Bill and Ted.
Yeah. It's definitely affectionate satire, but satire nonetheless. And the same is true of like the 90s yuppies, basically, like Missy's bougie seance group.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what reminds me. It's like, oh, this is like social satire is at the heart of these movies. Yeah. And maybe that's something else that we've forgotten. That it's not. These aren't dumb movies. They're movies about types of people that might be considered dumb.
Right.
In some contexts. But yeah, so
I mean, you've referenced it because they go to the seance so Missy's seance sends them to hell.
Right.
And this is where we really get dark.
And this is not the joke that I think is as funny as the first time I saw it, although it's fucking funny. But I still remember the falling into hell from my first viewing of this movie.
You mean the like
descent
the
into
forever
hell, a perfectly timed and executed gag.
Yeah.
And an incredibly simple one. They keep screaming because they keep falling, and then they wonder why they're screaming, and they're looking around at how much they're falling. It sort of doesn't get any better, really.
Yeah.
I think it's... And when they get to hell, you know, there's that mix of videographic.
Was that the joke you were
effects.
talking about in the
No,
ranking?
It was not.
Okay.
The best is yet to come.
All right.
Hell is this mix of videographic and practical. Again, that early 90s sweet spot of two modes of effects.
You know what's
and
great, though, is it looks like a precursor to South Park. Bigger, longer, and uncut. Like, that's what it looks like.
And then when they get into the Hell Maze, it looks like a precursor of Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, right.
To the point where I wonder whether Guillermo del Toro is actually saw
as
this
talented as...
No. Maybe he saw this movie and was influenced by it. I was like, it's kind of ridiculous how much this looks like Pan's Labyrinth. But just that switch to like neo-Gothic art design when you get to the military barracks in this hellscape.
Well, because now
it's
you're
expressionistic.
Yeah, it's expressionistic, but you're at the same time you have vibes of things that you recognize, like Twilight Zone or Full Metal Jacket,
and comic. You know, the kind of the way that comic books are illustrated as well.
And because if you remember Twilight Zone the movie, you know, this section of the movie looks like certain aspects of one of those stories.
I haven't made that. I hadn't made that comparison, but absolutely working on that level.
Yeah,
it's kind of stunning how the kind of set design there is in this kind of a movie.
Exactly.
Like so much into it. And then,
but that's what I mean about drawing from the deep well, and that's I just respect this movie so infinitely for the ideas behind every choice that's made.
Yeah,
they're endlessly fascinating.
Alex Winter plays his own granny, and you know it's in a scene as chilling as anything in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
It's the Easter Bunny as well.
It also plays on that thing of when you're a small child, the way you build it up in your mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely, yeah. Like expressionistic, it's
right.
A psychologized version of representation, and it's magnificent. And okay, so here it is. Here is one of my favorite jokes in comedy cinema. Right here. It's the playing Battleship with Death.
Okay.
With Death.
I was gonna say, is it when they summoned death in the battleship?
And in 92, 93, I didn't know that I hadn't seen The Seventh Seal, so I didn't know how funny this is.
That's what I meant in our ranking episode, where I knew of The Seventh Seal, but that at that time I hadn't seen it.
But
so some of it goes over me a little bit.
Right, but it's just the idea of it is funny. The bones of it are funny.
Yeah.
The idea of playing Battleship, you know, death challenges to your game. You expect it to be chess, in mind, but it's not.
Yeah.
But it's Battleship.
But you also have to keep in mind that it's prefaced with Death. You know, the reason they gave him the Melvin and ran away was because Death had said, no one has ever beaten me in anything.
Right.
You get to choose the game, but no one's beaten me ever. And then, of course, you have William Sadler. And when you get to have William Sadler saying, you sunk my battleship.
You have sunk my battleship.
Excellent! Yeah!
I have that line. That's the first time we even get an inkling that William Sadler is going to be a comic character.
Right.
And that speaks to his ability to fluidly move between drama and comedy.
Yeah,
and then
you start to
think, line.
Yeah.
You have sunk my battleship.
In is he going to be the character of very few words?
Right.
And then, yeah, of course, once you have the battle, and this is also where you get the different idea of the character, because I love the idea of him being a sore loser and childlike. Yes. And I mean, all of that works astonishingly well.
And you know what? I want to, like, obviously I'm more analytical watching it now than I was when I was younger. And I can see now, like, what makes this set piece stand out. They are not in a rush to get this joke out of there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can let it breathe. A lesser director, a lesser screenplay would rush the shit out of this.
Yeah.
They'd montage it. They'd cover it with music.
Well, and that's the other thing, because this movie is, like, structured, like,
tightly.
to the minute.
To the minute, yeah. I have that note.
Yeah.
It's a tight 3-act structure. Literally
So tight.
Literally, like, you tick over the 30-minute mark,
mm-hmm.
and there's a key turning point in the narrative.
Right.
And then the same thing happens 30 minutes later.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perfect.
And so they are in hell and dealing with death for exactly or very close to 30 minutes in an hour and 30-minute movie, you know?
For that reason alone, I agree that this should be taught in film school.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that really struck me about this movie when I watched it for the purposes of this podcast.
And just the confidence as a director and as performers, especially performers that, like, apart, not William Sadler, but the other two get a lot of shit for not being good actors, which bugs the hell out of me.
Which is, it bugs me too.
The comedy is made through simple acting and editing choices.
Yeah.
Not overthinking, overcomplicating, not too much mise en scène. You just let the joke breathe, and it can run and run, mm-hmm. and build, and it does. Yeah. Just don't get in its way. Just don't step on its way. Don't step on its feet. This is my biggest irritation of directors who claim to be comedy directors stepping on the joke visually or orally, mm-hmm. or don't do it.
Just
get out of the way,
off.
Paul Thomas Anderson.
I knew you were going to say it.
But it's really interesting.
Can you maybe for the audience, can you give a specific example of what it is you're talking about? Like, what's a specific thing he does in Licorice Pizza or whatever?
Yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, I can't relive that movie right now. But
okay,
I was going to say in the ranking episode, but I didn't get around to saying it, that part of the reason why I'm in such awe of these early 90s comedies
mm-hmm.
is because we simply don't have that balance now,
right?
In comedy cinema. When I see Hollywood comedy movies, and admittedly I don't see enough of them to make general assumptions, but when I do see them, I'm either insulted. They either insult my intelligence,
mm-hmm.
or their lofty ambitions miss out comedy altogether.
Right. Yeah, they fall.
And the reason
cliff.
Licorice Pizza irritated me so much is it's both. It's a failure on both counts.
All right, then.
So, and again, that makes me question whether, is this really as good as I think it is, or it's just because because modern day cinema doesn't try to bridge the gap between mm-hmm. two different kinds of cinema. That's what this movie is all about, and that's why it's brilliant.
Yeah. All right, let's take another break.
All right.
Then we'll come back. We'll come back and finish up. How about that?
Bash Paul Thomas Anderson some more. He made some good films. Boogie Nights. Love it to death.
Boogie Nights is great. I'm a bigger fan than you are. But you know what? Let's not go down the road. Fuck's sake. We'll talk about it for another 10 minutes. We'll take a break and come back, everybody.
He's knocking on my closet.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And, of course, we are back once again, ladies and gentlemen, finishing up with Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. I fucking love this movie. Fucking love this movie.
Also, we just picked up with the introduction. Well, not the introduction of Death as a comedic character, but it's also important that he's the straight man,
right,
in the routine.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
We now have an entirely new element to the central dynamic.
It's like you've got
like it's not just the characters and the story that's moving forward. It's the comedy is actually moving forward. It's becoming a different kind of comedy.
Yeah.
It's a comedy of the
two. You got two Costellos, and now you've added an Abbott.
Right, or like Marx Brothers, I suppose. You've got your. I mean, he's he's better than a Zeppo, so I suppose he's like a. He's a Chico, I suppose, in a sense.
There you go.
Sort of like not as extreme as the other two, or maybe even a Groucho. I don't know.
You're right. But I have constant notes where the first act ends. And I wrote perfect first act. The second act ended. I wrote outdid the first act. That was unbelievable.
Like clockwork.
I mean, the well-oiled machine that this movie is really astonished me when I watched it.
Yeah,
it was a joy to find that out about this movie.
And yet, it feels indulgent in the right way. You don't feel like you're. It doesn't feel utilitarian ever.
No.
I mean, when they're kind of playing tennis with their robot heads, it's like you're still having fun. It's just like you're having fun, but on time. Right?
And yeah, exactly. And speaking to your point earlier about the actors themselves and having in the past gotten shit for not being good actors, watch this movie and watch them play Bill and Ted. Essentially exactly the same,
yes,
but evil.
Right, and it totally
because it's all there.
Way. You would never mistake the two.
You never would have interchanged them. You know exactly who they are.
Die for that level of subtlety.
Ugh.
It's about here that we go to heaven.
Oh yeah.
Again, more like great interplay of video and practical effects. We got, something as simple as a glass floor.
Right.
And then some more kind of complex.
And that's how they
effects.
walk in.
Yeah,
that's the first thing you see.
Again, like, it's like the twins in Judgment Day. Sometimes the simplest answer is the best.
Is the best
about
answer.
How we do
exactly.
the effect.
Yeah.
We just film them, from underneath glass. And Station.
And fucking Station.
Exquisite creature design and puppetry.
Yeah.
Again, it enters into a whole different domain of filmmaking. It's like we're in Labyrinth suddenly.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I was gonna say it's, because they also kind of look like a version of the creatures, the good creatures, the sort of wizards from the Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal, very much so, yeah.
At least in the face.
It's like,
And
but you know what?
but they're as good as anything Jim Henson has ever done.
I have exactly the same. I say it's the equal of a Yoda or a Jabba in design, but
Yeah.
it might even be better because I don't know what visual magic they're working here, but this puppet has a mobility that the Lucas Henson puppets never had.
Yeah, right.
When Station is going around the parking lot and in the DIY store, it's like he is moving with the rest of the characters.
Yeah.
I actually really don't know how they pulled it off. I'm sure it's a very complex interplay of like blue screen and puppetry.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks entirely organic. I don't see the seams at all.
Yeah.
So I think this might be like, this is Henson Plus. Right? This is not like, you're not matching Henson. You're
You're exceeding Henson.
that fucking Yoda puppet, its eye started doing weird things after one movie. It's like Jabba couldn't go fucking anywhere.
Right.
This guy's got it all. Station has it all. And again, it's like, why aren't people talking about Station when we go back through the annals of creature design?
Right.
Is it just me who's impressed by this? Is no one else impressed? So, and it's just, it's so random and so surreally silly, everything to do with Station. It's just glorious. We've abandoned logic for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, right.
It's beautiful to
But
have
when you
that
also-
in your screenplay, which otherwise is like, explains everything. But refuses to explain this. That's how you know you're working on
You're
another
right,
level.
exactly.
You can go,
Well, and the
this
sublime part
entirely
is
random character will never be explained.
you're also dealing with two creatures that are never going to be fully explained, but upon meeting them, they are playing charades and they are trying to deliver Smokey and the Bandit Part 3.
And then Butch and Sundance, the early years, and then earlier in the
that's
movie
great.
there's a reference to Exorcist 3,
Yeah.
which is where the...
1 and 3.
1 and 3. But
Yeah.
it's there. It's an acknowledgement that we're in the world of sequels, and it's beautifully done.
Yeah.
And so much. That's what I'm saying about, like, I never noticed that was pointed at sequels, because I remember the joke of Death guessing Butch and Sundance the early years and the embarrassment of it being the
Right.
joke. But I'm like, yeah, that's still the joke. And if you didn't
Yeah.
understand the significance of it, it's as funny. But oh, that's a famous and famously bad sequel.
Yeah.
Like Smokey and the Bandit 3 or
Part
2,
3.
whatever. Yeah, I'm like, oh, they're
Because Smokey is the bandit.
talking about them, and I'm like, oh, now I'm going, oh, they're talking about themselves.
Right.
That's what they're worried this is. I mean, it's perfect.
It's amazing.
Oh, just beautiful. I love the DIY store montage. It's like action movie mission prep meets the dressing up montage. It's just great. I'm so glad they chose this as their montage opportunity, not the playing games with death.
Not
scene.
the playing games, exactly.
Because
not the
that
battle
would have
with
been, that's
death.
the low hanging fruit to do that.
That
as
would
a
have been
montage.
upsetting.
Right,
and
because the
The
joke
amount
is the silence.
of time. Right. Yeah.
It's the silence. It's them playing battleships in silence. That's why it's one of the best jokes in cinema. That there's time of them they're actually playing the game for real. Like, you don't get a sense of like, you're not using music to cut to another scene
Yeah.
immediately.
That's fucking great.
There's something as well that is so 1991 in this scene for me, and it just
The
reminds
DIY.
in the DIY store is like, just reminds me of what the tone of media was at the time of me growing up, was when Death walks past someone who's smoking and says, I'll
Yes.
see you soon.
See you soon.
And it's that turn towards moralizing in 90s movies, like family friendly,
right.
to the point now where if anything has a cigarette anywhere near it,
Well, and
you have to put up a thing that says,
it's historically significant because we were at a time in which we were transitioning from if you smoked, you smoked, and it was even probably thought of as cool, to
Right.
these are terrible things that will give you cancer and bring death to you.
Yeah.
And we have, politically, the tobacco companies
Yeah.
are being sued
Exactly.
by the federal government. And so, it's all wrapped up in that
It
as
is.
well. And
It's the difference between Ghostbusters 84 and Ghostbusters 289. You know?
right.
Literally no one has... Literally everyone in that movie has a cigarette hanging out of their mouth.
Yeah.
In the original. Not one to be seen in 1989. Another robot version of Bill and Ted. Not just another version of Bill and
Right.
Ted. Another robot version. That's two sets of robot Bill and Teds.
So now we've got 3 sets of Bill and Ted's.
2 of them are robots.
Yeah.
And I just love that the aesthetic seems to be the Dire Straits video Money for Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They want them to look like those digital characters in the video that launched MTV.
There's somewhere around here, I think it's also, maybe it's in the store where Death says reaping burns a lot of calories.
That's right, yeah. Don't discount my ass, I think he says. And this is another animatronic practical masterpiece, these robots.
Yeah.
They literally look like they're made from a homemade kit, which is what they are in film.
Which is what they were, yeah. That's the thing I love about it, is you have the exact replicas.
Yeah.
And then you have Station that puts these together out of... But it's also carefully constructed by the filmmakers.
Yeah.
To look different, but right. You know what I mean? In the sense of, like, these could actually work.
These could actually work, yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of homemade quality. And let's not forget, by this point, Station has turned into
one being.
And at some point, he goes back into being 2 beings. I don't remember seeing that happen, but it happens at some point. Because now that that's happened, everything is off the table with Station. We don't need to see that again. We know he can randomly change states. I really love here that we get the round the world montage, which reminiscent of the Superman movies.
Yeah, right.
Could almost be the same Italian running the Pisa Tower.
The Pisa,
store.
yeah. Superman 3.
And I gotta say, it makes all the difference double casting Sadler as the British guy.
Right.
Just perfect.
Well, and, from a comedic level, the reason it works is because you're showing literally everywhere in the world glued to the San Dimas Battle of the Bands contest, which is patently absurd.
It is. It really is.
But that's why it works.
But also that, it's a very good choice as like doing the show, the dramatic showdown of the movie as a concert appearance in front of an audience.
Well, and I forgot that, the first people you're really seeing there is Primus.
That's right, Primus. Well, let's not forget that we've seen Sir James Martin from Faith No More.
From Faith No More.
In the very first scene of this
at the
movie.
beginning of our film, yes.
Founder of the Faith No More Spiritual and Theological Center.
Right.
But what's interesting here is like having basically abandoned time travel for the entirety of the movie. It comes back hard here.
Yeah, hard and fast.
But also in an inventive way. Like they figure out that we have access to time travel, so whatever we make happen is going to happen.
Well, this is of that sequel convention
time travel
too,
with our
because
minds.
Yeah.
Which is such an advanced use of that plotting.
This is a sequel convention in the sense of the one-upsmanship, because
Sure.
this is a plot point from the first movie.
Yeah.
But then the villain,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So they up the stakes. It's an up the stakes
It's an
kind of
up the
sequel
stakes
convention.
Moment.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm just surprised like it's not a more common device, because it can get you out of all kinds of trouble.
You mean in these movies?
In
Or
any
in
all
any
time
movie?
travel movies.
Yeah, right.
I would use that device at a drop of a hat if I was stuck.
Sure, right.
Here's about where we find out that George
Yes,
Carlin is
that-
inside Pam Grier.
Inside, yeah,
As
that
a-
Pam Grier
Which
is
I'm
in
sure,
fact
which
George Carlin.
I know would make me happy. I'm sure it makes him very happy as well. A lucky guy. Yeah, so this is the reveal that it was Rufus all along, guiding them.
Right.
Also, of the
Did
big.
you remember that, by the way?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
Also, the Denominus, as you revealed, is rather than being Rufus's nemesis, he's his old gym teacher,
It's amazing.
which is a fantastic reveal. But here's another point where they use time travel in like a really interesting way. They say, "Let's go off and get good and come back."
Yeah. Right.
And it's like that's
16 months.
But that's like the philosophy of the screenplay, isn't it? It's like we can't waste a second, right? Everything. So it's like, so if we have time travel, let's use it as a way to do passage of time
Yeah.
without having to like cut to another scene or add another scene in.
It reminds you of Einstein going into the future by 1 minute.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, when they come back, their beards are a delight.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, and then we're basically into the credits at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Which I have nothing to say about.
No credit check for you?
Of course I do.
Oh, okay.
Of course I do.
I was like, there's because I caught myself halfway through and I noticed something about whatever it said, excellent gaffers or something like that.
Yeah.
And it gave me a
rubbing off on
chuckle.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have that. So, this credit check is pretty much the movie. Like, it's still part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first note. Where we have what looks
Well,
like.
I would contend all credits are still a part of the movie.
You're
I don't
correct.
leave till the
well,
credits
obviously,
are done.
I think that too. But for the norms out there,
Right.
this is not one of the more skippable ones.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're going to watch the next movie.
Yeah.
So we get what is kind of like some like newspaper articles that are moving in a kind of screensaver fashion across the screen.
Yes.
Kind of bouncing around in this proto screensaver.
But you got newspaper, you have
magazines,
magazine articles, yeah, you've got covers.
and it's like it's a succession of in jokes that may or may not be canon, depending on whether this is the end of the story or they go on and do another movie. So, kind of gives us the flexibility to play it both ways.
Yeah.
You suspect that this could be the button on the series perfectly well. They might have achieved all their aims, but you know, it's like if not, you can cherry pick what you like for the next movie. Because all of these headlines are not going to come to fruition. But some of them could.
They seem to suggest in the next movie that almost all of them did.
Yeah, quite a few of them did. Crucially,
Yeah.
some of them did. And then, like you said, that they're playing with the credits Naked Gun style, putting evil and
Right.
good precursors in front of people's names. Non-heinous, stellar, bodacious.
Right.
Again, not wasting a second in the movie. The credits are as entertaining as the rest of the movie.
Well, and we didn't mention this, but at certain points in the movie, when they're saying, like non-heinous, or they say heinous, non, I forget which one they went. I guess it was heinous. Like, there's a positive or a negative depending on how many times
right.
Alex Winters says it, which I really like.
I do too. William Shatner gets his own thank you, irrespective of Paramount approving that clip from Star Trek. Which makes me think
Oh,
they may
wait,
have had to negotiate with him separately for
Maybe.
use.
I think it was heinous,
Oh, okay.
right? Maybe that was it. Anyway,
Um,
go on, sir.
the Bill and Ted novelty song.
Yeah.
I know this was the time for such a thing, but I still get annoyed by songs made entirely of sound clips. It was not a good period for music in that sense.
Right.
But this time has gone, and it still grates on me. I love that this movie ends with like a, be excellent to each other and party on.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the credits, like this is exactly the kind of affirmation that
Because this is the
keeps us going back.
philosophy of Bill and Ted.
Yes.
And I love that it's at the end of the credits.
Yeah. There's a it just kind of caps off the charm of this movie, I think.
Yeah.
And its affirmation and positive energy for
Positive energy. It's my last note. Like
once
the
of
last
a
note says,
less new agey phrase, but that's kind of
Right.
what it is.
my last note is like the simple philosophy of be excellent to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of says everything about the movie and these two characters.
Right. It did completely, and it's an attitude, and it's it's another attitude that is scarce in more recent comedy.
Right.
Like we're pushed to either embrace characters to stupid extents or be detached from them. Ironically, it's like here you can kind of have it both ways.
Yeah.
It's smart enough for you to have that ironic detachment.
There's no cynicism, but
Right, but there's no
for Bill
cynicism
and Ted.
towards the characters themselves, and it's such a good, like a working rule of how to do comedic characters. And I'm surprised that we've forgotten about that.
Have gotten so far away from it.
So far away from it. Apart from that, I haven't really mentioned like my only nitpicks about this movie. There's a little too much objectification of women.
Mm-hmm.
Looking down the bra. For some reason, we're only filming Pam Grier from behind. At certain points, and with the camera between her legs, which I find disturbing. The minimalization of rape in relation to the princesses, I think, is problematic. And then there's a terrible piece of homophobia in the final scene.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the dropping of Bill and Ted with the homophobia.
Yeah, with Joss Ackland.
But that's also a callback to the first film.
Yeah, but it even has to be. It's clearly not even Joss Ackland making the aroused noise. It's clearly a piece of ADR. So that just
Right.
says it all about how that shouldn't have been in there.
Yeah.
But those are 1991 things. I don't lay that at the door of the movie at all. You would get that in any 1991 movie. Unthinkingly.
Absolutely. Unflinchingly.
Yeah. And so, and sometimes it, the other thing that's kind of interesting, and I think that's what they're trying to kind of apologize for or answer in the next movie, and I don't know how successful they are at it, but certain kind of sexual morals, the idea of the foursome here is kind of embraced in a way it isn't in the next movie, which I found interesting.
Well,
like the idea of that they're just this happy foursome who might all have sex with each other. We don't know. It's sort of fine because it's the 90s and we're looser. But in the next movie, they have to have a therapy session about that.
Yeah, but to me, that's not wrapped up in the sexuality of the couples. It's wrapped up in the
There's a couple
friendship.
of moments that make that pretty explicit that in this movie.
In this movie?
I think so.
Well, what, just because they have two beds in the same room?
Well, that might be part of it, yeah.
Maybe that's enough, yeah.
Like, it's weird that the more recent movie is kind of denormalizing that. Whereas the early 90s movies are like, yeah, whatever the fuck you want to do, whatever you want your relationship to be.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of funny. It's like we've become more entrenched in our conservative attitudes to sex and relationships. the more
Yeah.
time has gone on, which seems counterintuitive. But that's all I had.
All right. This is a great fucking movie.
Yeah, you should you, the listener, if you have misgivings about this movie, should go back and watch it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's on HBO Max. Do it. Do it now.
Watch some other stuff first. You know, I mean, go ahead and watch The Seventh Seal.
Twilight
Go
Zone,
ahead
the
and-
movie.
Yeah, I mean, you might
That episode of
want
Star Trek.
you might want to watch Full Metal Jacket, some Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah,
watch-
there's a little Full Metal Jacket, isn't there, in the military
Yeah.
barracks? Yeah.
Yeah,
Working on that
Maybe,
3 to 7 years rule.
the cabinet of Dr. Calgary, or Wings of Desire, even, or you know, some Wim Wenders,
Well,
Wim Wenders shit.
all of that is in here, and for us
Yeah.
to say that without question means that it's a smart movie.
Right, exactly. All right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey is in the books. Coming up next, of course, we'll be talking about Bill and Ted as they face the music. Tell us what you think of Bogus Journey, though. We really want to know. Do you love it as much as we do? Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Please send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. The man is Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. I am Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. You'll be hearing us next week for As We Face the Music. Say goodbye, Tom.
I can't believe we just Melvin death.
That's a perfect end.
From high to low.
Yep. All right, everyone. Well, you'll be hearing from us next week or next time, whenever.